Hey, welcome everyone. Glad you're with us. I'm going to wait for a little bit while people start coming into the webinar. And in the meantime, why don't you write in the chat box where you're calling in from today? Would love to know where you're all from. All right. We have Flagstaff, Arizona. Awesome. Vancouver. Yes. Portland, Minneapolis. I was just in Minneapolis a couple last weekend. It was 90 degrees in Minneapolis. All right. Awesome. Okay. Where else is everyone from? All right, let's get this started, should we? All right, welcome
Sure.
everyone. I'm Jeff Schreifels, principal and owner at Veritas Group, and I'm excited today to be with you. Before we get started with the conversation, however, there's a few little items I want to know about this webinar system. So, your questions are incredibly important, and we'll have some dedicated time for that. But you're welcome to submit your questions throughout the conversation today. So please type those in the Q&A box, not the chat box, the Q&A box. And to make it easier, that makes it way more easier for us to track those questions. And there is an option to submit your questions anonymously, which you're very welcome to use, but we encourage you to use the chat for conversations and connection because our goal is really to have this be a space for community as part of that. And we're asking each of you to commit to making this a safe space where questions are welcome and where we're all working together to grow as leaders. So thank you for participating in this manner. And lastly, we'll be sending everyone here a link to a recording so you can be on the lookout for an email for that link. Now, I'm really thrilled to welcome my special guest, Erika Albert, Senior Director, Major and Principal Gifts at ALSAC St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Erika, thank you for being here.
Well, my pleasure. It's really going to be a really fun conversation today.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, fundraising is been my life's pursuit, my career ever since I was a 13-year-old being treated at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So as I mentioned in the chat, I'm calling in from a little town in Indiana, and it's actually close to where I grew up. And at age 13, my local doctor did not know what to do with a tumor that was growing on my spine. And we sent that tumor all over the United States, Mayo, Sloan Kettering, Cincinnati Children's, Riley, and St. Jude was the only hospital that responded. And it was such a profound, um, life-changing moment for me. St. Jude saved my life, and I knew that I wanted to give back to them in some way. Thought I'd be a doctor, a researcher, a nurse, and luckily found the program at Indiana University in nonprofit management and fundraising. So I'm one of these new leaders that have a degree in nonprofit management and fundraising and really have dedicated my career to working towards working at St. Jude and ALSAC. I've worked in a hospital system in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and then worked for a YMCA and then a larger YMCA system in Indianapolis before I came to St. Jude, and have spent the last 11 years growing from doing major gift work and covering a territory to managing our major gifts team and now leading the organization's strategy for major and principal giving.
Awesome. I think you're the first person that I've met that actually has a degree in this. That's
I think
amazing.
you'll be meeting a lot more of us because it's
I
such
know.
a growing field now.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks for sharing your story. And everyone on today's call, it's gonna be a little different than our usual webinars. We're not gonna have slides. Instead, we're going to be chatting about leadership and some of the challenges leaders are facing right now and how you can address those and strategies that will support you as a leader in this time and environment. So, to start us off, Erica, I know you, like other leaders, have been feeling the pressure of funding concerns and a lot of the changing environment. What are some of the ways you're addressing the pressure around fundraising right now?
Yeah, a few of the questions that we got before this discussion kind of hit on the same thing. Um, the fact of the matter is that there's a shrinking middle class, and some of our traditional fundraising methods, direct mail, sustainers, some of the annual giving practices that we've all employed over the years and have done really well for our organizations, we're seeing shrinking or flat revenue growth from those areas. Even some events, although that's started to certainly recover since COVID. And so there's more of a reliance on growing revenue from major and principal giving, from donors that may be able to give a little bit more. As certainly as that kind of 1% in our society of wealth grows more and at a faster rate. And certainly with these tax cuts, we're seeing more of an opportunity there. So many of you, like us, are kind of faced with our upper leadership saying, hey, we know this is your goal for the fiscal
Yeah.
year, but we actually need you to do this because our organization is feeling funding constraints in other areas. So we're getting that pressure from our organization, from our funding needs, and we're having to figure out as leaders, how do we translate that down into the staff that are doing the frontline work for major and principal giving? Or
Yeah.
if we're in a position where as leaders of this particular revenue areas, we're having to do some of that work ourselves. And how
Mm.
do we manage through that pressure as leaders that are also holding portfolios? And I often ask myself is like, how much do we want to push down to our
Yeah.
frontline teams? Because haven't we been saying over the years, and certainly when the economy is doing well, follow the best practices. And if you're following the Veritas way like we are, it's consistently doing those outreach points. It's having that strategic engagement plan. It's having a goal for every donor. And when you push that pressure down, what does that message send to our team members who are having to do that relationship that they've planned out? Are they having to ask sooner? Are they having to pivot their strategies? What
Yeah.
does that mean? And so it's a question of how much do you push down and how do you push it down to your frontline team?
So what are you doing? Well, I mean, if you think about it, yes, you're right. They all have goals already, right? And so now there's all this pressure. And what are you going to do? Go back to them and say, you know what, that 1.5 million that you said you were going to bring in, or that 4 million, we're now going to have to bring in five.
Yep,
I mean, how do you
yep.
shield them from that?
So and we have employed that strategy many times. I think everybody can recognize when you push it down and then what happens.
Yeah.
Um, you know, some donors might give a little bit more, but it could damage a lot of the relationships and a lot of the really good cultivation work that your teams have been doing or you've been doing yourself. So what we're trying to do is not push that pressure down. And so we want to make sure that we're loving our donors the same way we would when the economy is good when it's bad. And
Yeah.
when those that turns around, that giving, we see that giving. But in this case, the economy's all over the place. I mean, the
Yeah.
stock market's still doing
Yeah.
okay. We're still seeing revenue come in. It's just coming in a different way. So we're really trying to keep the pressure at the leadership level. We're trying to manage that pressure without pushing it down as much as we can. We want to hold our teams accountable. We really want to do it through inspiration. How can we inspire our teams? How can we really keep them focused on building and keeping and maintaining those donor relationships and working their plan? And at
Yeah.
the upper level, we need to be making sure that we're looking at our pipeline, that we're looking across the board at where that revenue could come in. And we're trying not to push that pressure down on our teams as much as we can and managing that um, at a leadership level rather than
Yeah.
pushing it down to our team members.
I think that's really smart. And obviously, they're going to thank you later for that because I mean, I hear all the time from frontline fundraisers who are saying, I have this goal and now I've been asked to do all this other, another 500,000 or another million. And while we can always go back and look at our portfolios and say, our top A level, let's look and see if we really did a more outreach here. Could we get more revenue from that group of donors or not? So that's one exercise, of course, you could do. But outside of that, being able to protect them like you are doing is a much better route to go because otherwise they're going to feel that pressure and they'll just go after the money rather than the relationship. And you know, you know how that goes.
Yeah, but it's got to be partner. You can't just do that. It's got to be partnered with a couple things. So, to leadership level, what we are pushing down is coaching towards solicitation value, not volume. So, what we don't want to do is
Yeah.
push down this like ask everybody. We're in a crisis. We need more revenue here. So, let's ask, ask, ask. But what we do want to do is for our tier one donors or tier A, however you're managing that, we want to be coaching certainly those donors we've already qualified is what's our strategy for those tier A donors? How can we get in there and partner with you from the leadership level to make sure that you have the best strategy possible, the best team possible to support you once that donor is nearing a solicitation so that we're working on slowly increasing that solicitation value, not necessarily the volume of solicitations that we're
Yeah.
doing. So, one, we as a leadership team are committed towards like really focusing on those qualified donors who are in tier one and increasing that solicitation value over time. So that's one. And
Yeah.
then two, what investments can we make as a leadership team to do the things that we know will increase that value over time? So working with our fundraising team, but also how can we train the team to look at talking to donors about more complex assets because we know what is it only 3% of donors that are high have a high wealth capacity, only 3% of their assets it's held in cash. So if we're
Mhm.
only asking for cash,
Right.
we're not going to be able to increase that bucket or that value very much.
Yeah.
So, how does our team know about talking to donors about IRA giving, stock giving, CGAs? So, how are we training our team in that area? And then, what are we doing to maybe increase advertising or pipeline development of donors that could potentially give through those assets? Okay, so we're
Yeah.
as a leadership team not trying to push that pressure down, but we're saying, what can we as leaders do to coach to value and then make long-term investments that will increase the value of our pipeline?
Yeah. So this kind of ties into my next question for you. And that is, we've been talking, okay, what do we do in a current crisis time where all of a sudden now we have to raise more money right away? That's one thing. You've addressed that. And you've kind of alluded to this next part, and that is how do you manage your team long term? And one of the clues you gave me is that you're training the team along the way. But I've always thought that you all have done a really good job of how you look at your frontline fundraisers and what a value you see in them and that you want to keep them for the long term. So share more about what you do to retain your people and make sure that those folks are managed well. Because I think a lot of leaders struggle with that. Well, we know this. A lot of leaders struggle with this. Like, how do we not only just bring in the revenue that we're supposed to bring in, but that we also take care of our people long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously as a sector, we know we have potentially an issue with the tenure of our teams, right?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
is it like 18 months? And you're right, at ALSAC St. Jude, the tenure of our major gift team is more like 5 years plus.
yeah. So what's the secret here? That's what I
And
want
we,
to.
like most organizations, we're not a sales team. We're a philanthropy team.
Mhm.
So we don't have sales bonuses. There's no,
Right.
real monetary outside of like a normal, review cycle that's based on top performance gets bigger, salary increases, but there's no bonus for hitting
Yeah,
larger goals. So you have to motivate them in a different way.
yeah,
And, I think it's twofold. We really look at inspiring them on the type of impact that they are making. So, I always have believed we're going to get more production, productivity, and tenure from team members that really believe in what they're doing. So, first and foremost, we want them to see the impact that they're making with their groups of donors. So, we really lean into our funding priorities, not only for the donors, but for our team. So, when we bring our team in, we want them to see y'all helped build this advanced research center or this
yeah,
patient housing facility, or you've helped fund this research. You did this. Our team funded 60% of this out of our budget. And so we're always making sure that they're seeing their impact and we're trying to lead through that inspiration piece. And then, two, if we can commit as a leadership team to not pushing that crisis down,
yeah,
to not increasing their volume of solicitations every year to an unmanageable, unrealistic
yeah,
expectation, and we're keeping their metrics consistent and doable, then they're able to do the fun things of portfolio management and focus on that relationship without feeling like they're a sales team that has to meet quotas. They actually enjoy the
yeah.
work that they're doing.
That's so good. I wish other nonprofits would adopt that ethos for how to manage their people well. I mean, otherwise, we would see them here longer. I mean, you're right. They're leaving every like 13 to 18 months or so in between that period. And when that happens, you don't you don't really get to build that relationship because usually it takes 18 to 24 months to really have a solid
Yes.
relationship where you really know the donor's passions and interests and you can match that up with all your programs and projects. And that's where it really happens. That's when the net revenue really takes off. So 5 years is amazing.
Yep.
It'd be
And
great
that
to,
within
yeah,
that time period, we don't increase, like we keep our volume of solicitations within industry best practice, and often they exceed it. So we might set a goal of 20 solicitations or 15 or 12, and they'll reach 25. And our managers, because we're in a matrixed management environment right now
yeah,
where the leadership team sets the strategy and we're coach and develop. And then we have a set of managers that actually manage our frontline team. Um, so oftentimes a manager might say to me, well, they met their goal. Shouldn't we increase it for next year? And we say no, we might increase the value of the solicitation that we want to ask them for. So they might move from 25K plus solicitations to 100K plus solicitations. Or if you're at 10, it might go to 25.
yeah,
But we don't want to increase the number that they have to do because, again, we want to focus on the quality of relationship building over time and the value, the lifetime value of that donor to the organization and that team member to the organization.
yeah. What are some other areas around training that you hold up high for your fundraisers. So, um, how do you look at that when someone comes in new versus somebody that's been there a long time? How are you thinking about training for your people? How does that look?
Well, I mean, this is not a plug for Veritas, but several years ago, you and met at a conference, and I said at that point, I think we're going to be adding on significant number of team members and a growth model. And, we need to be onboarding those team members differently than we would coach someone that had been at the
Yeah.
organization for a while. And that's really where we decided we didn't have the capacity to necessarily manage or onboard a significant number of team members, and we needed some outside help. So what Veritas has helped us do is provide that kind of onboarding consistency and helping us get to a more qualified portfolio. So really, instead of tenure, we're looking for how quickly can we get this team member on board and qualifying donors and getting to a qualified portfolio. So that's where we've partnered with you. And then our team, as leaders and coaches, our small leadership team, can focus on those portfolios that are 50% qualified, 75% qualified, and really focus on those donors that have a relationship with us, that have a plan and have a solicitation in the future. And that's where we spend our time training and coaching them. And
Yeah.
really, we're training in two areas right now. I'm going to keep saying this. We're coaching in complex gifts.
Yeah.
First
Yeah.
and foremost, that's the number one thing I believe you can do to increase revenue from this major and principal gift program that anyone is operating is an investment in complex gift training for your team and education. One, that's like most of our training is focused on that. And
Okay.
then two, we really lean into what I would call funding priorities. Like, what's our organization's funding priorities, and how do we help our team members match those funding priorities to the interest of our donors? And where those two match is where we see the value of those solicitations going up over time significantly. So that way, we're not in crisis mode because fundraising at this level fluctuates. It's not like direct mails or stainers where you can see that slow trajectory. This revenue line goes up and down a lot, which makes leadership crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we have to manage through that more.
Yeah. Okay. So there are some people that are on this webinar that are in much smaller shops.
I understand.
Right? And you've been there
I
yourself.
have.
Um, Maybe give some advice or some thoughts around what do you do when, you might have one MGO or one mid-level person, or maybe you're even a smaller shop where you're it. Um, how do you balance the crisis versus the long term for that, for a small shop like that?
Same principle. So oftentimes, I'm thinking back to my YMCA days, which I loved. I loved working for the Y. But we had a really active board. It's made up of community leaders, YMCA members, and corporate leaders.
Yeah.
And then we had, executive directors, vice presidents who have a variety of expertise. And so whenever you'd hit a crisis, they'd be like, we need to add more events. We need to send more direct mail pieces out. We need to search for grants, and we need to go. I'm sure all of you and we need to look at businesses for sponsorship.
Yeah.
All those categories. But
Yeah.
do you ever hear them say we need to invest more in our bequest strategy, our planned gift strategy, our individual giving strategy? No, you hardly ever hear them say that. But we as professionals know, you can look at the Giving USA trends to back it up, that that's where the giving growth is coming from. And so we as leaders have to be good at politely saying no to our leaders and to our board and offering solutions that do work. And that's investing in individual giving relationships. So what I try to say is, even if you're in a small shop, is what our first strategy should always be: looking at our current givers, the people that are already giving to us, and making plans about how we can develop relationships with them more. How can we
Yeah.
lean in with board members to develop their relationships more, not from businesses, from individuals. If you have an executive director and vice presidents that have relationships, how can you help them manage their portfolios? Okay? They are busy. They have like 10% of their time to work on fundraising, probably at most. So you have to help them work those moves. And then you have to carry a portfolio as a fundraising leader and not let all that urgent stuff get in the way of the relationship building that you need to do as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was one question in the chat that I want to address, and the size of the major gift portfolio that's sustainable. I always think that a major gift portfolio, depending on what your major gift threshold is about 100 to 150 people. But in order to grow a qualified portfolio of 100 and 150 people, you might have to work with 450 donors to figure out which ones want to engage with you in that way and which ones might be a prospect towards major giving. Megan, I hope that helps.
Yeah. That's good. Now, I'm really interested in those that are listening to us right now, or listening to Erika, I should say. Um, what are some of your thoughts around what she's said so far? I would love for you to put those in the chat. Erika, you can go and look in the chat to see if
I
there's
am. I'm looking
any
at both the chat and the
conversations
Q&A.
right now about anyone that's comments about what they've heard so far, so that we could have some discussion around that. And uh, for those that have questions, we'll start answering questions. Um, if there's not
Yeah, I want to address a couple of them, Jeff. So,
questions
um,
or in the chat, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the Q&A and the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
So, Lindy, yes, I do mean 150 qualified donors in a portfolio, but to get that many qualified, from Veritas, only 1 in 3 donors. For us, it's actually 1 in 4 will engage with us relationally. So we know our gift officers have to work through a lot of discovery with a larger number of pipeline donors to get to that 150 qualified. And I always love when we can leave a little bit of room in that portfolio for new donors to come in. So I love when I see a qualified portfolio of 125 with a little room to grow.
Yeah. So you talked about complex giving. You made a big deal about that. How do you how do you teach that to green new major gift officers? That was
Yeah, so we do it in a variety of way. We make sure that every year at the national level that we are budgeting for professional development for every one of our major and principal gift officers. So that way, even in this matrix environment, we're ensuring that they get to go to at least one professional development conference every year. And so we really lean into those conferences that have that element to it. That are teaching a little bit about complex giving. That's one way. And then when we bring, so we do a monthly meeting with all of our major and principal gift officers and their leaders, and then
yeah.
anyone else in the organization that wants to lean in. And so we have at least a half-hour segment on that call that focuses on one or more of complex giving vehicles.
Hmm.
And then we bring them in once a year where we do a deeper dive into our gift acceptance policies. And we really lean into scenario based training where we might go over a donor scenario where they could apply several different strategies. One of the speakers we have leaned into a lot on complex giving because so much of his material is free is Russell James. So if
Yeah.
anybody follows Russell James on
Yeah.
social media, we've had him actually come in and talk to our team before. And what I love about his is he's applying complex giving and listening cues to the joy of giving and helping the team members be kind of this um, catalyst to making the donor a hero
Yeah.
and using complex giving to do it.
Yeah.
but it's through the lens of the joy of giving and the beauty of philanthropy.
Here's a good one. This one's a good one for you. Um, how do you influence the leadership team that's focused on the cash in hand this fiscal year to make sure that they understand the importance of planned gift commitments for organizational stability?
Look, I think the best thing that you can do for your leadership team is to make that case using data.
Yeah.
Okay, so like data is king when you're talking to leaders at that level that are looking at current year revenue, but they're also looking, let's hope your leadership, and in most cases they have to be looking at 3 to 5 year revenue projections. So
Yeah.
the more that you can use the data of your major gift team to show how their portfolios increase in value over time, the more you can project and forecast out what that investment will do and how it will grow over time.
Yeah.
So I always try to do here, let me show you what the value of this can be over time. And then I try to use Giving USA trends. I try to use the great transfer of wealth and other industry data to make the point to leadership that we should make investment over the long-term haul. So let me give you an example.
Mhm.
Since we've started working with Veritas, we made the shift several. I'm going to address this in a couple of days. We made the shift several years ago to start measuring our MGOs on what's called committed revenue versus impacted revenue. Impacted revenue is measuring revenue in the door.
Yeah.
Committed revenue is measuring the value of the solicitation that's accepted. And that could be a blended estate commitment, it could be a multi-year commitment, it could be a larger one-time commitment, and we're measuring them on that committed revenue. But I'm starting to look at as they get more qualified portfolios. Let's say they have a portfolio where 100 donors are qualified and have goals. The value of that revenue in the door increases significantly. And that's the case I made to our leadership recently to add on more MGOs. So I was able to say when they first start and only 25 donors are qualified in a portfolio, average revenue is 1.8 million. And once they've been on board and they've qualified, let's say 100 donors, our average revenue is 3.8 million from that portfolio.
Yeah.
So we have been able to use that data to show what that investment will do over time.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we have a number of questions. This is great. So I'm going through those.
Okay.
The first one is just an easy one for you. It is, where did you get your degree from, Erica? I'm
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah. No, I didn't mention that, Laura. I got my degree from Indiana University, Bloomington. At the time when I went through my program, which has been a while now, they were the number one nonprofit management and fundraising program in the country. So I my undergrad and grad in that program. It served me very well. But now there's actually the School of Fundraising, the Lilly School of Philanthropy, based out of Indianapolis, which is a great one. And they actually have programs for people that have already gotten their degree and they come back and go through a certificate program, which I think is really good. You want to be careful when you look at that degree program now because there's part of that degree that's theoretical. So you're looking at like the sector as a whole and trends and kind of like what's going on with the philanthropy. And then there's a more practical part of that degree program. So you just want to make sure you're looking at what part of that program would work best for you and what your career goals are.
Awesome. Here's a question from Laura. We have funders pulling back on their level of support because of the uncertainty today. How do we keep development officers centered on the work while also looking at enhancing engagement to increase solicitations? My team doesn't quite get the urgency of the moment.
And that's where I think you can't just lean into complex gift training. You have to lean into where your organization is on funding priorities. And so we may not be pushing down the crisis of like, this is how much revenue you have to make up, but your
Mhm.
team should absolutely know what your organization's funding priorities are. And if one of them is because this source of funding has dried up and we have an urgent need here, your team should be talking to their top tier donors about that. They may not be increasing solicitations at that moment, but wouldn't you want them, especially the donors in tier A and tier one, to be saying, this is where we're at right now? What would you suggest? So asking for their advice, seeing if they're in a position to help. Because if you have the right donors in your pipeline, theoretically, they should be getting tax breaks.
Yeah.
And theoretically, we should be looking at the third sector, the nonprofit sector, to do more when government is stepping back to do less. And so I am not afraid to have our fundraisers talk to their donors about where we are as an organization and what our funding, what is happening with our funding, and asking if that is something they might be interested in helping with us in the future. Or
That
what
was
would
one.
that look like to
That was
them?
that kind of reminds me of a question that was submitted before this webinar in preparation for it. Um, Here's what the question was. It says, we're trying to balance not overly alarming our donors with funding concerns while also letting them know what the real need is and how they can help. It's difficult when the need is a moving target with different funding sources changing frequently and a lot of unknowns that we're bracing for. We're constantly shifting right now, and it's way too much information to share effectively. So, what advice do you give to those folks that are kind of working in that kind of atmosphere?
It's such a delicate balance right now because probably many of you, and this may not be there's certain missions that have a different donor base than we do. Our donor base is comes from everywhere and is all walks of life. And so we as an organization are careful about any sort of stance we might be taking overall for the organization. And we really, again, lean into what are our funding priorities? What programs, what avenues do we need to focus on for our major gift officers? So I would say it's harder to talk about all these nuances with your larger donor base. It should be easier to talk about these funding problems with the donors that know you best. And
Yes.
so I get concerned again when our leaders come down and say we should be looking for new donors
Yeah.
to help us in this crisis. You're going to have a hard time there because it's a lot to digest.
Right.
But those donors that have been giving to you for 10 years, 5 years, your best prospect is the donors that already have been giving to you and that are already in your portfolios and already know you. And those donors you can go and have a more transparent conversation with.
Yep. Good. Uh, Here's one. What conferences would you recommend for best practices in networking?
I mean, it depends on the sector. It depends on where your team is and if you're looking for leadership connections too. Um, AFP and AHP I think are great for networking with larger groups. I tend to like smaller conferences at this point. So the conference that I've really liked over the last couple years is from CASE. And it's the Transformational Giving Conference, and it's a much smaller conference, and it's allowed me to network and build kind of that part of our major and principal gift program out more. In terms of what trainings or conferences I would really like our team to attend, um, I love Eddie Thompson's work and the work that he puts on a conference every year in Nashville. I think it's the Charitable Institute. You come away with a certification from that.
Mhm.
Love Russell James and anything he does, and it's all free webinars. Love that.
Mhm.
Obviously, we encourage Veritas, and each one of our team members meets with a Veritas coach for a full year when they come on at ALSAC St. Jude. And then another area that I'm pushing team members a lot on right now is getting their CAP certification. So many of you have probably heard about the CRFE. The CAP certification is a charitable advisor in philanthropy. Okay. So it's something that actually professional advisors can get to. Really great resources. We actually fund them getting that certification, and it focuses more on how they can advise donors in their philanthropy rather than the best practices like the CRFE leans into a little bit more of like how to set up a fundraising program. The CAP certification focuses more on that complex gift training.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a number of people asking about training specifically around complex gifts. And what do you do? How do you, not just do you do it, but like what are some of the other ones? I think you've mentioned Russell James, but are there some
Eddie
other?
Thompson, the CAP
Okay.
certification. So I think I answered some of it, but if you're building that internally, here's what I would suggest. Start with your gift acceptance policies. Figure out which complex assets you can accept, what the process is for accepting them. If you don't have good gift acceptance policies, lean in to make sure that you're creating those and making that process as easy as you can over time for your donors. And then start to train your team more on those gift acceptance policies and doing more donor scenario based, not role playing, because Lord knows nobody actually wants to do role playing. But can you come up with scenarios? There's a lot on the web or ones that have actually happened in your organization where a donor says, "Hey, I want to do more, but I need income. I need to make sure that I have enough income to live on for life." And once we hear that listening cue, we think charitable gift annuity. And so, like, the more you can do
Yeah.
with those scenarios with your teams and training, but start with your gift acceptance policies.
Yeah. Here's a question from Anna Lee. She says, Erica, you made a comment about not letting the urgent things getting in the way of the important work of building relationships, especially for fundraising execs who have to deal with a lot of administration and other urgent work. Do you have any advice on how to balance the need to cultivate donors and prospects with other urgent tasks as an executive? Any rule of thumb about how much time you should be spent on managing your own portfolio?
There's so many factors there. The easiest thing that I could say that has worked for me over time, because look, I've tried calendar blocking for my own portfolio time, and I have a portfolio too. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to say this, I always carried a portfolio. I've always worked with vice presidents to get them to do more with portfolio work. So I don't know if it's a percentage. I don't know if calendar blocking works, but every day when I'm doing my to-do list, I can pull one up. This to-do list, you can do it. I'm a paper person. Every day, I want to put my donor portfolio work at the top of that list. And that's my way to ensure that all the urgent crap that I'm dealing with
Yeah.
stays to the bottom. And then I'm doing the donor portfolio work first. And then when I'm working with my executive leaders, because I'm always coaching them, I'm making it as easy as possible. So I'm managing their next steps and I'm writing what email I need them to send. I'm
Yeah.
reminding them that they need to do this. I'm
Yeah.
helping them set up a visit. I'm making sure that they're doing those next steps. So I can't really answer the percentage other than just saying it's a true discipline. You will have to manage those next steps for your leaders, and you absolutely have to lead by example and making sure your to-do list starts with those donor steps. And then
Yeah.
using data to prove to your leadership team that if you continue to make investments in long-term relationships, that's actually where the revenue will grow more significantly than an event, or Lord knows, asking a corporation to give you more, because that's not where the money comes from.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, there's so many great questions. It's hard to keep them track, but I'm really trying here. So here's one from Rita, and this is what she asked. She goes, I'm it as the executive director. My board members do not understand their role. How would you translate your focus on training to educating board members to do some of this work?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with individual conversations with your board members. So, one, we need to treat them, even if they're not, like major donors, and they need to experience the beauty of philanthropy themselves. So, when I was a shop of one, and when I worked with the ED, so I guess we were a shop of two, I made sure that we had individual conversations with board members about their own personal giving
Yeah,
instead of asking the board as a whole to give 100% at the board meeting.
yeah,
Number one. And I'm always asking for their opinion and advice. Number two, we created a council outside of the board because our board makeup was not major gift donors. We made sure that it was representative of the community that we were serving. Okay.
yep,
And
yep,
so we created an extra council that actually helped us with the fundraising and more better fundraising give donors and could not tolerate a monthly meeting like our board. And that council ended up being the better group that I was going to help me buid relationships with the
yes,
larger donors. Two, three, I got really a lot better at saying no when they said, there's a fundraising deficit, we need to add another event. And I just kept saying no.
yeah,
So I got really good at saying no. And here's why. Let me tell you why. And then made slow investments to start increasing training for the board, like maybe bring in an advisor or an outside consultant to do a little bit of training on plan giving for them. So there's a couple ideas that
yeah.
you could use
Okay,
there.
I like it. I like it. Um, you mentioned the importance of sustainability in today's changing economy. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on nonprofits being asked to dramatically raise their fundraising goals, say tripling them to cover university budget cuts?
Well, I think you need to look at the pipeline.
Yeah,
So help your organization look at where you've been in the past. So, if you can look back 5, 10 years, look at where your growth is coming from. Again, the more you can use data to help you make the case, the less it's about your opinion and I mean, you can use Giving USA trends all you want, but a lot of times they don't believe you. Use your own pipeline as a way to prove that. And so, for example, this year they said, our organization said, well, given the economy and given the growth that we had last year in revenue from major and principal giving, we're actually going to only ask you to increase your revenue by 4%. I knew that was not going to be where we were going to land. And already they're asking us to increase it to 25%. And then I think after the end of year giving, depending on where we land, we'll probably have to increase another 10%. And so what I'm doing is I'm not pushing that down to our frontline team yet. I'm not even saying that yet. I'm going back and looking over the last 5 years and saying, okay, what's been our average growth rate?
right.
What's been our pipeline to get there? What's our unassigned pipeline? So how many donors do we have currently giving at certain levels or capacity levels that are unassigned or are not in portfolios? Do we have any headcount growth? What investments do we make? So again, I'm using as much data as I
Yeah.
can to paint a realistic picture of where I think that revenue can come in and when and how. And
So,
usually I'm saying, okay, we might be able to meet those goals, but this is the investment that we'll need you to make in order for us to get there.
so I want everyone, I just want to pause for a second after you just finished saying what you did. So, what Erica's done here as a leader is before she takes the pressure off from her leaders onto her people, she's doing the work first to look at all these different things to see, one, is it even possible before she would pass that on. I cannot stress enough how important it is as leaders to shoulder that burden before you pass on anything else to your team because they already are burdened. They've got goals to make. They've got relationships to build. So I just wanted to take that moment because I found it so rare to find good leaders that see that take on that responsibility. So thanks, Erica, for doing that. Now we'll go back to some more questions because we have some more. So Garth asked this question. Is it valuable to grow prospects by asking for referrals from qualified donors? What's been your experience? Is there any good data or evidence that this should be actually pursued?
I mean, of course it should be pursued. You know, one, your best prospect is that prospect that's already given to you, and then that prospect oftentimes is bringing in peers to your organization based on their own experience with how giving to you has been.
Yeah.
First you want to make sure that the donor that's already giving to you has this amazing and great experience with your organization. They feel the impact of their giving. You're talking to them about what's important to them before you ask again. And then one of the questions always should be in your follow-up is, um, you know, would anybody else like to be a part of the organization? And I always try to
Yeah.
back into it a little bit more like, does anybody else want to give? It's more like, would you like to invite someone to come with you to our donor appreciation luncheon or our event or whatever? Would you like to come take a tour? And would you like to bring any of your closest friends with you? But the biggest success, Garth, that we've had is when we can ask a donor that's giving, and usually, we know the makeup of our major and principal gift donors pretty well. They're older, they're usually 60 plus. We ask if they'd like to bring their family or their financial
Yeah.
advisor to come with them. And that multi-generational strategy has worked actually quite a bit better than the peer-to-peer strategy for us.
Interesting. I love that. This one's about DAFs, and this is kind of a technical one.
Okay.
Now, if you have a donor who wants to do a multi-year gift with a DAF, how do you structure that? Because they have pledge forms for DAFs, but you're not supposed to have pledges as a DAF. So
Yeah,
how do
look,
you
there's
go around?
some interesting rule on this. The way that we handle it is we try to get them to sign instead. It's not really a sign. It's intention to give.
Okay.
So it's like an intent to give form. So we actually don't use our regular pledge form. So if someone wants to make, like, let's say they want to fund a lab in our new Advanced Research Center and they want to give from their DAF, we might say, we might come up with an agreement that says it's our intent to give 500,000. It's our intention to give through our donor advised fund, but that is not a legally binding commitment. And it's them saying they're going to recommend this grant, but they can actually not sign a multi-year pledge agreement.
Okay. Okay. Good. That's a good workaround. Um,
Our
okay.
intents to give bookable, I do not believe they are.
Okay.
We do not book those right now, Lori.
All right. We have a few minutes left, just a few minutes. We have a couple of questions left. If there's anyone that wants to ask a question, do it now. All right. I'm interested in the specific historical data you have looked at to make the case for what's possible for growth. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of them. I'm looking at the overall value of those portfolios. So what within a portfolio, how much revenue is coming from the donors within that portfolio and how does it grow over time? So I want to look at that. I want to look at, I'm looking at revenue from we have a particular revenue line that tracks like gifts to DAFs, IRAs. I mean, if you're not talking about IRA giving right now, gifts from your retirement fund, y'all like that should be your biggest emphasis. I mean, I'll tell you right now, that's how we've grown
Why?
so much.
Tell us
It's
why.
a well, we have an aging population that's
Okay.
reaching 70 and a half, and they have to take minimum
Yes.
distributions. And that is the best way to give to charity because they don't have to pay tax on it. And oftentimes they do not need that retirement income if they are high wealth. It is also the best asset to pass on to a charity versus their heirs because the heirs are going to have to pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
So you should have, if you don't already, because the big thing for many years was like, what's your DAF strategy?
Yeah.
You should be talking about an individual retirement account strategy. Absolutely. We have seen that giving increase when that legislation was made permanent, that they can roll their RMD over to a charity or their QDC. Um, that is the biggest area of growth for
So
us.
what's the conversation they're having? Your major gift officers are having. So if that's the
Well,
focus for them.
let's say we're talking to them and we've qualified them and they say, boy, you've been talking about this project. It's the new clinical center. I'd really like to get involved with it. I really want to do more, but this is just how much I can give. And then the relationship manager, and I think this gets to Naomi's question, might say, well, have you ever considered giving out of your IRA? And it's just planting the seeds.
Yeah.
So we're not saying we are financial advisors. We cannot give tax
Right.
advice
Right.
as a relationship manager for an organization, but we can plant the seeds for something they might consider and something that their financial advisor might not even know to talk to them about. So we're really leaning into that. So that kind of answers the data that I'm looking at. I'm looking at how many donors are giving through those giving vehicles. How has that grown? And then we're building a strategy for that. We are not trying to be financial advisors. We're trying to plant the seeds and listen to cues for ways that donors might be able to give more, not out of that 3% cash bucket, but
Yeah.
out of their retirement fund, their stock
Yep.
assets, their assets, because that's where you're going to get more of your revenue.
Awesome. Erica,
Oh, thanks, Lindsay. That's so
thank
sweet.
I know. This has been amazing. It was probably the most questions we've had in one of these webinars before. You have been great, Erica. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Um, and folks, if you want more support and community to support, you got to head over to the Veritas Community Hub. So there's thousands of people on this asking questions just like this, and there's a team of people all around the world answering those questions. So please go to the Veritas Community Hub. This is a free community space. It's designed to create opportunities for people just like you to ask questions, connect on those common topics, and learn from your peers. And we hope to see you next week's session, where I'll be talking to Rachel Wiley, who's the CEO and founder of Culture Kinesis, for an incredible conversation that will leave you inspired and motivated. She's really big on holding vision for leaders. How do leaders promote vision to their folks while also having to deal with the challenging times today? So, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.